School may be out, but senior recess was in session this weekend in Mobile. Mel Kiper Jr. and I tell you which players made statements ahead of the draft. That is coming up. Plus, we're responding to your questions, your takes, and your draft dreams live as we say hello and welcome into First Draft, as we are now available Monday and Thursday afternoons. We are on the ESPN, NFL on ESPN YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast. Plus, on Mondays, they throw us on the TV. He is Mel Kiper Jr. I am Field Yates. Hello to our ESPN2 audience. Mel, we're going to get into a Senior Bowl recap in just a bit and all the latest around the NFL draft. But before we get started, I got to ask you, did you see this pass rush from Mike Green of Marshall against Josh Connerly against Oregon? If you haven't, take a look at this play last week in Mobile. Woo, baby, the Mean Green Mike. Wow, Mike Mean Green. Holy cow. That right there is quite a bit of power, Mel. Perhaps the most viral play of the week at the Senior Bowl. Nice week in general for our guy, Mike Green out of Marshall.
Yeah, you talk about making a statement, Field. Are you kidding? I mean, that's kind of one of those things that you always have in your memory bank about Mike Green, because Josh Connerly could be a first-round draft choice, and we want best against best. Good against good. That's what you get in those one-on-ones. And for Mike Green to come off the year he had in terms of production, getting after the quarterback, in the Ohio State game, he had a sack in that game early in the year. They knew they had to stop him, chip him, keep him away from Will Howard, and they did that. But he did get a sack. So I think for a guy like Mike Green, when you make a statement like that, and that's a play that it sticks with you for a long time. We always go back to that. It was more than just that. That's not like he's a one-play wonder here. This guy did it through the course of the year. And that's the thing, perspective, Field. We need perspective now. Coming back home, you settle in. I know you're doing that now. We're looking at tape from last year and the previous year, and we're trying to figure out how we're going to stack these guys. There's a lot of good players, a lot of positions from rounds 2 through 7. Stacking your board, stacking in terms of positions is going to be key, because we're going to be 3 years from now looking back and say, boy, how'd that guy go there? And the team that took him is going to be thrilled. But who do you take based on who's available? That's why stacking is so important. And it's a variety of positions this year where there's kind of a log jam. And we're going to get to some of those during the course of today. And how do we settle those disputes? How do we make those key decisions is going to impact 3 years from now, we look back on which teams had the best draft.
Yeah, that'll include the tight end spot, which is very deep this year. We'll dive into the names that you need to know at the very top of it. But we're going to start today's show before we get into the Senior Bowl a little bit later on, Mel, by talking quarterbacks. And you and I have spent plenty of time dissecting both Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. But the player who we thought at one point might enter the first-round conversation is Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. The curious case of Jalen Milroe, if you will. He had 20 rushing touchdowns this past season, Mel, with just 16 passing touchdowns and 11 interceptions. As things stand right now, and it's early February, would you say that Jalen Milroe is still in the first-round conversation or even the quarterback 3 conversation, or what is his current stock?
Yeah, it just depends on who you talk to. It's potential rather than what you're seeing right now. You got to project, and you got to say, where will he be in our offense, our coordinator, our players, and if he keeps developing and evolving as a quarterback. And he's going to have to, because the inconsistency we saw at Alabama, we see again now down in Mobile. But the talent's there, and the want to is there. The desire is there. The love for the game is there, okay? So I think for Jalen Milroe, it's about just projecting. It's not what you see. It's not who you are. It's who you will be. And that's the way you have to look at it with Jalen. Is he in line for QB3? For me, probably not. I know you were higher on Milroe throughout the season than you are right now. I'd be curious to see if you feel he is still QB3 for you. For me, probably not. Will he be 4 or 5? Yeah, but there's really 4 quarterbacks, maybe 5. You can stretch it to 5 that are vying for that QB3 spot. And we don't want to write. I have a pen here. I should have a pencil, because you want to kind of do it in pencil. You do the pen in April. For right now, in early February, it's pencil. And for right now, it's safe to say, Field, he's in the discussion.
Yeah.
But for me, QB3 is a little rich.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mel, and I will just say this. Having spent the week closely following Jalen Milroe and all the quarterbacks down there, and also talking to people that were at the Senior Bowl and gathering opinions of people that might be in draft rooms of teams that are going to eventually take a quarterback in this year's class, I think it's fair to say that Jalen Milroe, more than any prospect in this year's class, is going to be beauty in the eye of the beholder. And you suggested this already, but it's going to be Jalen Milroe in some people's eyes as a player who is too inconsistent as a thrower. He might follow one frozen rope with a ball that lands 5 feet short of a wide open wide receiver for an incompletion. And they may say, Mel, this just isn't a player that we think can develop into an NFL starting quarterback. So we would not take him until maybe day 3 of the NFL draft. There might be other people who say, despite the consistency right now, or the lack thereof as a passer, he might run a 4.35. That might be a little generous, but not much in the 40 if he runs at the combine. He had a fantastic game against Georgia early in the season. We have seen the rocket arm on vertical shots down the field. And man alive, is he a difference maker as a runner. And that might be good enough for a team that has time on its side, that has patience on its side, and has a quarterback coach and a coordinator that knows what it's doing and says, maybe that's a top 45 or 50 pick. So I think that by the time it's all said and done, Jalen Milroe's grade might be as wide as really any player in this entire class that we are talking about as much as we do. I would bet on the kid, have spent some time with Jalen Milroe, really impressive young man, but I do think draft grades are going to be all over the place for this player. Not too far behind him at one point during the season, Mel, was Quinn Ewers of Texas, who, of course, arrived to Ohio State a few years ago with all the accolades, one of the first major NIL athletes. Finishes his college career with 3 years at Texas, helped him to a deep run in the playoffs that last year and this. Where do you land on Quinn Ewers? Again, early February stock for Quinn, who was not at the Senior Bowl, but we have seen plenty of his tape over the past 4 seasons.
I watched him yesterday. I went back yesterday and I had some time to go back and look at some players, and he was one of those, Fields, and I knew we'd be talking about him today. The thing that I think with Quinn Ewers, if you could bottle some of those games and some of those series and some of the throws and say, boy, if we could just level that off. What I didn't see, and I want him to put the foot on the gas, and when I say foot on the gas, with that arm, I didn't see a lot of muscle throws. In the NFL, you got tight windows. You got to muscle those throws in there, right? You got to stick it in there. And the thing is, he can do it, but a lot of times he's trying to just loft it out there, lay it out there. And to me, sometimes you gotta go 80 miles an hour. Okay, you can't go 30. You got to go 80. And I think from an arm standpoint, he's shown it. I just like to see it more on a consistent basis. But he's going to be one of those guys, and people are going to be all over the place on. Some are going to say, no, I haven't seen enough to say he can be a successful starting quarterback in the NFL. Others will say, hey, yeah, if you can just take this game or this series. I saw that throw. I saw him be that guy. You go back a couple years ago, he went into Tuscaloosa. He was unfazed going against Nick Saban's defense. If you've seen plenty of glimpses of Quinn Ewers, showed he could be a successful starting quarterback, but it hasn't been consistent. And we haven't seen, I think, the progression and, like I said, those muscle throws that I want to see on a more regular basis, I just didn't see enough of.
Yeah, I think let me start with some of the good stuff here for Quinn Ewers, Mel. I am buying more into the value of experience this year because we just saw the transition that we from Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix, and I think having played a lot of football is becoming a bit overlooked now in the draft process. I'm not saying you have to have started 4 straight years, but there is real value in that in terms of knowing what you are getting. He is an accurate thrower. He does have the ability to kind of contort his arm and throw from a variety of angles, does Quinn Ewers. He's an okay athlete, though, right? This is not the kind of guy who really changes the complexion of the game with his legs, especially relative to some of the quarterbacks that will go high in this year's draft, whether it's a Cam Ward, perhaps whether it's a Jalen Milroe. On top of that, Mel, you mentioned the arm strength. There's not a lot of zip here for Quinn Ewers. He can certainly place the ball in the window when the window is presented there, but the arm strength is a bit of a limitation here. And perhaps the trait that I will be most curious to see where teams land on for Quinn Ewers is the pocket presence, Mel. This is a guy who obviously played behind an offensive line, not just this year, but last year as well, where there was a ton of NFL talent, right? Christian Jones, his right tackle last year, goes in the 3rd round to Arizona. Kelvin Banks probably going to go, he'll go in the first 15 or so picks this year, and his center, Jake Majors, and his right tackle, Cameron Williams. But there were times in which you just wish Quinn felt the rush a little bit better. And when you're not this super athletic quarterback, Mel, where you can dance away from pressure, you got to be money with your in-pocket mobility, right? The top of the food chart is the Peyton Mannings and the Drew Breeses, and of course the Tom Brady. Those guys felt pressure even when they didn't see it. I don't see that trait from Quinn as much. So I would say, as of right now, Mel, and again, it's February 3rd when we're having this conversation. If you had to ask me, and I know this is the question that everybody always wants to know, where does Quinn Ewers go in the draft? What round? I think the earliest right now, Mel, the earliest, in my opinion, is round 3. What do you think to that statement?
I have no issue. I'm looking at my board right now. I'm looking at 7th quarterback. He could be 8.
Yeah.
So you're talking about 7th, 8th quarterback. When I stack the quarterbacks field, that's going to push him down a bit. You see him there at 7. Well, he could be at 8 very easily because 8, 9 are very close. So I think when you look at where we are with Quinn Ewers right now, I'm thinking day 3, maybe late day 2. But a lot of teams feel like, hey, if we don't feel in the first or second round, particularly the first, that he's our guy, that we can say for sure in a couple of years or right away. This is a league about right away now. Yeah. Right away, he's got to be consistently playing at a high level. We don't feel that. He might drop to the 5th round.
I'm with you,
because there's going to be all these quarterbacks aren't going to go. There's going to be mixed opinion. And when you get to a certain point, if you don't believe in him in the second, you're going to believe him in the third. So then all of a sudden they drop more than you got need. So that's how these quarterbacks tend to drop. We had Michael Pratt last year thinking, 3rd, 4th, in the 7th round. So Rattler went in the 5th round. Spencer Rattler did. So again, these quarterbacks this year, and I think it's going to be really fun to see between now and late April, whether Will Howard, who did a good job at Kansas State, won a national title at Ohio State, had that Joe Flacco run we talked about. Yeah. What happens with him? Jaxson Dart said, hey, Jaxson Dart, when he's in a situation where it's just got to be dropped back down at Mobile and adjust, you saw him improve. But what does he need to do? He has to be on a field in an offense where he can use his legs because he's an athlete and he can run. Yeah. So that's what you saw in the game situation where you're not going to see it necessarily as much in a practice setting. So for me, I think it's going to be really interesting who ends up at QB3, QB4, because those are the guys that project into that day 2 of the draft.
Yeah, my money right now is on Jaxson Dart, who might, by the way, find his way into the first round of the NFL draft. I have a mock draft coming out next week. Not that I'm trying to tease America, but what could be coming. And again, on Quinn Ewers, 3rd round might be best case scenario, Mel. It could well be day 3 based off of where the grades stand as of early February. When we come back, we're going to dive into a tight end class that may not have a Brock Bowers, but may have a couple of guys who could hear their name called around where Brock Bowers was drafted last year. More First Draft in just a minute. All right, welcome back to First Draft. He is Mel Kiper Jr. I am Field Yates. Check us out over on the NFL and ESPN YouTube channel. And Mel, the tight end class this year looks really, really good. But we got to start at the top with 2 Big Ten guys who have been Big Ten tight ends the entirety of their career. With all due respect to some of these guys like Terrence Ferguson, who played there one season because Oregon changed conferences, Tyler Warren from Penn State, Mel, might have been the most fun player for me to watch during this entire last college football season. What do you make of him?
You never knew what he'd be doing in the field. I mean, he was wearing a lot of hats in that offense this year. He was a quarterback in high school, to lefty, and he was under, in a shotgun, a wildcat. He's doing everything. They're moving him all over the place very creatively. He's throwing passes. He's running the football like a fullback, like Kyle Juszczyk, and it's a big kid. You don't realize how big he is when he's wearing that number 44, but 104 of his 153 career receptions came this year. They did a great job, and Drew Auer knew that, hey, this is my guy. Remember, they weren't star-studded on the outside, right? They had the 2 outstanding running backs, kind of a new look line up front that did a good job and really progressed. But Auer to Warren, and Warren just doing so many things creatively, is the reason why I gave him the nod all year as my number 1 tight end, with Colston Loveland a little banged up. Maybe that second tight end who's really good, by the way. Colston Loveland's a really good player. And there's a couple other guys as well that are good. So this tight end group, that H-back group, if you want to even flip them over into that H-back situation, really strong field this year. You're going to get some really good pass receiving options well into day 3.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We'll talk more about Colston Loveland in just a minute. Tyler Warren, for me and you, checks in around, you have at number 13 in terms of your overall big board. I'm a little bit higher here, Mel, and part of that's reflective of this class, right? There's not the same caliber of players at the very top of the board compared to last year, but I do think that Warren could go in the first 10 or 15 or so picks. I don't know if Tyler Warren will run a 40 Mel during the pre-draft process. My guess is that he might not, because I don't think he's going to run this 4.4 time or 4.5 time. He might be a little slower than that. I'm not sure it matters. I really do think this might have been the best run-after-catch player when you combine all attributes that go into that in the entire FBS landscape not named Ashton Genty. This guy's powerful. He is determined. He's fearless. He runs through tackles. He runs through face masks. This guy is incredibly tough. He will go very, very, just a darn good football player. Don't overthink it here with Tyler Warren, who, by the way, in Mel's last mock, went to the Colts at 14th overall. All right, so you mentioned Colston Loveland. This question comes from Wormburner44, might be a lacrosse fan over on Twitter, who wants to know, what are the chances that either Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland make it to pick 22 for the Los Angeles Chargers? And Mel, Who did Colston Loveland play the first couple of years of his college football career for?
That would be Coach Harbaugh. And I think when you look at what they did last year, remember, they took Joe Alt and they passed on Brock Bowers. And one of my mocks, I had Brock Bowers going to the Chargers, thinking, hey, this is going to be the guy. The Harbaughs have always been big into the tight ends. John Harbaugh here in Baltimore with the Ravens. Jim Harbaugh certainly with the Michigan Wolverines. And Colston Loveland missed some time late in the year. And they didn't even have the quarterback this year, right? They had the quarterback play was down from what it had been with JJ, right? But he had more catches. But his average per catch was down significantly because of the quarterback situation there at Michigan was an issue, was a problem. But with JJ, he was the guy. His speed, his ability to stretch the field, run after the catch. You talked about that field. Colston Loveland, will he be there? I'm a little iffy on that. I mean, he could possibly. Remember last year what happened? This is why Brock Bowers got the 13 when he was much more highly rated. And for me, I am way, way up there as one of the top players in the draft last year. Well, guess what? 6 quarterbacks got forced up ahead of Brock Bowers. Yep. 6 of them. 3 offensive tackles went, and the 3 big-time wide receivers went, right? That's your 12. 6 quarterbacks, 3 wide receivers, 3 offensive tackles. Brock Bowers is there at 13. The Raiders don't get the quarterback. Oh, I'm so disappointed, but we get this great Dave Casper, not a tight end, great tight end for the Raiders, right? Yeah. Well, now go get a quarterback, and maybe you won't be she's still crying the blues over the fact you didn't get the quarterback last year, but you got Brock Bowers. You get a quarterback with Brock, you got a heck of a thing going on with the Raiders, and that's going to be the challenge there with Pete Carroll and company. But certainly I think when you look at Warren and Loveland aren't Brock Bowers. Okay. But in this draft, you're right. They're going to get pushed up a bit. And there's several teams that, like I said, the Colts being one of them. The Colts, I think, will get one of these tight ends. Will Loveland be there for the Chargers? Or will the Chargers move up to get Loveland? Yep. Okay. Somebody may be aggressive and go up and get him. That could be certainly Jim Harbaugh.
So to give people some perspective, and I understand that comparing these 2 prospects to these 2 NFL legends is ridiculous in some ways, but we're still doing it just to give you an idea of shades, of traces of these players. Stylistically, almost think of Tyler Warren sort of like Rob Gronkowski and Colston Loveland more like Travis Kelce. Because I don't think these guys are going to be in the exact same order in every single draft room in the entire NFL. There's going to be some teams that say we think Loveland's a better player, some that think Warren is a better player. It's just stylistically a little bit different. The athlete of Colston Loveland is extremely hard to ignore. Meanwhile, the powerful, ferocious blocker that Tyler Warren, on top of all the run after catch skill, also very difficult to ignore. I'm going to give one more name because we have just a couple more minutes here on the tight ends, Mel, because there's a spirited conversation for tight end 3. Elijah Arroyo from Miami could be in the conversation. But I think there's a chance that it's Mason Taylor when it's all said and done, out of LSU, who had his best season as a collegiate this past year for LSU. No surprise with no Brian Thomas Jr. and, of course, Malik Neighbors. He got more opportunity. He had 55 catches. He had a pair of touchdowns as well. He does have rare, and I'm talking rare pedigree here, does Mason Taylor. He's the son of Jason Taylor, Pro Football Hall of Famer, who was down at the Senior Bowl last week. This kid's a house, Mel. This kid is huge. Very natural catcher of the football, and he can hold his own as a blocker as well at 250, maybe even a little bit more than that in terms of overall weight. Mason Taylor probably won't go in the first round, Mel. This guy's got the chance to be a starting tight end, though, as a rookie and play a lot of good football.
Yeah, you look at his career, it was steady. 2 years with Jaden Daniels, a year with Garrett Nussmeier. 3 catches to 8 catches. That's what you could expect in just about every game he played, certainly this past year. He was out there, reliable, consistent, right? But Elijah Arroyo, Miami, that's kind of the guy right now because he is gifted. He's talented. Most of his catches came this year with Cam Ward. It's going to be fun to see. I think Arroyo could maybe sneak up there. I think he's going to gain a lot of momentum, but certainly Mason Taylor, I think you know what you're getting. Like I say, very steady, reliable. It's a safe pick in that 2nd, 3rd round area.
Yeah, no doubt about it. He is a very, very good player. Elijah Arroyo, who I mentioned from Miami. How's this for his last season? 16.9 yards per catch. This guy is a big play waiting to happen. The athleticism was off the charts this past week at the Senior Bowl. For Arroyo, has been bothered at times by health during his college career. The talent, very apparent. And by the way, we did not even discuss the likes of Harold Fannin and Jake Brenningstool from Bowling Green and Clemson, respectively. There is a ton of depth at tight end this season. But coming up in just a bit, we're going to dive into the Senior Bowl because it was a great week down there in Mobile, Alabama. So stick around here on First Draft. We'll dive into our takeaways from Mobile next. All right, he is Mel Kiper Jr. I am Field Yates. And Mel, we just had a great week down in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. We can't cover every single prospect that we saw, but let's dive into a couple of standouts here. And you are up, and it's a defensive tackle class stacked on top of another defensive tackle class. 2-for-1 special this year. Who was a guy that stood out for you this past week?
The defensive tackle position, I said stacking that spot's going to be tough, right? So Senior Bowl was important, best against best. Joshua Farmer from Florida State, pushing the pocket. I mean, he is strong, understands leverage, violent hands, he's quick. I go back to the Cal game. If that Cal game could have happened a few more times, it'd have been in that middle of the first round. Joshua Farmer was on a defensive front, was supposed to be the fearsome foursome, right? It wasn't during the course of the season, but he's another consistent guy. He certainly popped down in mobile. He gave those guys fits. They did not want to see him line up across from them because he is a powerful defensive tackle. He brings that intensity. I think he's going to go a little higher than I thought going in, and I'm going to move him up a little bit from what I thought because there were a lot of guys bunched together. He ascends ahead of some of those guys. Joshua Farmer really helped himself in Mobile. Like I said, there was several games this year, the Cal game, the Florida game, just to name a few, that he was very impressive in.
Yeah, Mel, I'm just going to say this, and I think it's worth reiterating for the next 3 months that we have left before the draft. This year, like, your arguments of players 30 to 50 might be pretty darn close. So Farmer may be a top 35 player in my eyes or your eyes, and I might see him the inverse of whatever you have him at. So just worth noting as we dive into more and more players who are not, top 20-ish prospects. And Jack Bash would be one of them from TCU. What an incredible week it was for Jack Bash, the brilliant wide receiver from TCU who had a breakout season this past year. 62 catches for over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. This guy began his college career. He's a Louisiana kid who began his college career at LSU as a tight end. As a true freshman, he led the team in receiving yards. That's right, a roster that also included the likes of Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. And Bash was the guy that led the team in receiving yards. He's got very good size. He's got good, not great, but good speed. This guy catches everything in his way. He is consistently open. He understands leverage. This guy was a playmaker for TCU this past season. And this TCU team was not as dominant as it was just a couple of years ago. Incredibly consistent. And Mel, in a script that not even Hollywood writers could have come up with. In the final play of the Senior Bowl, trailing with an opportunity to win the game from the goal line, Jack Bash, who, by the way, had 68 receiving yards, ended up scoring the game-winning touchdown on the final play of the game, which you are seeing here right now, on that little throw from the 3-yard line. And I get it, it's an exhibition game, and I understand that the point of this week was not merely to play in that game. But this means a lot for Jack Bash, who tragically lost his older brother Tiger, who was a football player at Princeton a few years ago, and an all-league player in the Ivy League at that. In the New Orleans terror attack, the heavy heart of Jack Bash was clearly on display throughout the week. But what an incredible moment it was for Jack Bash, who is such a good player, Mel, who I know this wide receiver class is a little bit difficult to size up beyond the first couple of guys that we feel really strongly about. But if you told me by the time it's all said and done that Jack Bash goes somewhere at the tail end of round 2 or the top of round 3, I'd say that about adds up based off of where I am at right now in early February on him.
Yeah, you want Jack Bash on your team, Field. You just want him on your team. A quarterback's going to want him. You get it in that vicinity, and he's going to make the catch. I mean, you talk about a guy who will just go up and get the football and battle. Like I said, we're all rooting for Jack Bash. I think he's going to have a heck of an NFL career. A kid who everybody wanted coming out of the prep ranks was Shamar James, okay? Shamar James, you line up all the SEC schools, a 5-star recruit, every great athlete in high school in a variety of sports. This kid had an injury in 2023, but this year he was outstanding, second in tackles. LSU game, he was all over the field making plays. This is a kid, in that game, he had 11 tackles, 2 sacks, a couple pass breakups, and a forced fumble. This kid, for 3 years, when he was at his best, he looked like a guy that was just out there just seeing things before everybody else did. Super instinctive, super aware, and he can do anything you want an off-ball linebacker to do. I mean, this guy can cover. He can go sideline to sideline, and he's moving faster than everybody else because he sees it quicker, Field. And I think that's what I always know. Shamar James always popped in games, okay? He always did. And I go back even to 2022. I'm looking at notes I had because I always check players off if they're younger and just circle them, check them. He had multiple checks as a young linebacker at Florida. So this is a guy really, when he was healthy after coming back from that injury in 2023, put together a heck of a season. He was doing it in Mobile. Louis Riddick, I know, pointed it out during the course of the practices down there that Shamar James is a guy, the diagnostic ability for a guy off ball is going to be so key. He's about 6'1.5", 230. Shamar James, this guy's going to be a starting off-ball linebacker, and he's going to have, I think, a chance to be a Pro Bowl caliber player in the NFL.
Yeah, Mel, I would say this. I feel that linebacker is the position where what each team wants out of that position maybe varies more than any other in the entire NFL. There are teams that want these pint-sized linebackers that can really run. There are teams that are okay with the hulking linebackers that maybe aren't as fast, but they get downhill and really impact the running game. You know, what's interesting, I think, about Shamar James is that he can run. That was on display throughout this past week. This guy was moving all over the place, holding up in the one-on-one drills in which he was the pass coverage defender against these quick and agile running backs. But he's not tiny either. That much is for sure. This is not some guy who's going to get run over in the running game. Always hard to figure out exactly how that linebacker stack will look. I think Jahad Campbell from Alabama will be the top backer for both you and I throughout the process. But there's some good-looking linebackers that we saw last week in Mobile. We are not done wrapping up the Senior Bowl because we come back. We do have a small school lineman and a quarterback to dive into from our Senior Bowl standouts. More on First Draft in just a moment. All right, welcome back into First Draft. He is Mel Kiper Jr., and I am Field Yates. And we began the show talking about some of the quarterbacks, Mel, but let's just dive into it because, you know, we've talked about how by the time we get to April, pretty much every take will have been covered. And everybody will be saying, I told you so way back when that this could happen. Let's just have this conversation with a bit more passion right now than we have in previous editions of First Draft. Jaxson Dart from Ole Miss looked like the best, most consistent quarterback in the entire class last week that was at the Senior Bowl. Amongst the Senior Bowl, 8 quarterbacks, to me, looked like the most consistent. The best thrower, has a good build, good accuracy, was processing well, leadership, all those things were really impressive for Jaxson Dart. To the point now, Mel, where we know everybody's going to wonder how many quarterbacks are going to move up the board like they always do. Don't think it's crazy coming out of Mobile to think that Jaxson Dart goes in the first round. There's going to be a carousel that needs to spin with free agent quarterbacks over the next 2 months. Guys like Sam Darnold will have to find a home, maybe Kirk Cousins, a couple of others, Russell Wilson. But there are going to be some teams that are sitting there saying to themselves, who do we have to turn to? And not everybody can draft Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. Do you think, as of right now, it's insane that Jaxson Dart could go in the first round?
No, not at all. No, we have discussed Jaxson Dart a lot over the last 2-3 weeks, Field. And I tell you, people talk about the ability to make throws. Just turn it on. Turn the games on. And watch him rolling left, rolling right, making accurate throws, accurate strikes. This kid effortlessly throws the football down the field. And the thing that he can do is beat you. You think you got him figured out, and then he'll run for 10, 15, 20 yards. And he is tough, and he is committed. And there's no question he's a guy who's going to be in there early, coming out of that office late. This kid is all about being a great quarterback. And he's going to do everything he can to become that type of player in the NFL. Will there be an adjustment period? Sure there will be. But certainly for Jaxson Dart, you get into that late first round area where somebody can trade back in. We've always seen that over the years. Teams trading into the late first round. Thought that could even happen last year, but it didn't because those guys got forced way up, right? Penix Jr. and Bo Nix got forced way up into that top group. This year, that's not going to happen with Jaxson Dart. He's not going top 15. Okay, but he's going to be a guy when you get into those 20s and teams don't need a quarterback. You know, what happens there where the Rams are picking? What do they end up doing? Okay, so there's going to be some interesting teams, but there's also going to be that chance somebody jumps up. And again, there's competition. We talked about all the quarterbacks that are in the mix with Jaxson Dart, but this kid, I think the Senior Bowl improvement. Yeah. You go back to day 1, to day 2, to day 3, game day. You saw him feel more comfortable. And the throws, the ball was coming out quicker. He was seeing things a tick faster. So for Jaxson Dart to see that ability to acclimate, adjust, and get better, That bodes well. Yeah. That bodes really well for teams that wanted to see that, and it was evident. And it's something you were hoping for, because I was big on Jaxson Dart and wanted to see him keep progressing field. He did, and it culminated with a performance on game day. To me, Jaxson Dart is definitely, when you do your mock, I would think he could be in that late first round. I just want to see you're going to have it in a trade, or you're going to give him to a team in the late first.
No trades. No trades from me, Mel. I don't pull those hijinks. I leave that kind of stuff to you when you do your mock drafts. But it is possible.
You're trying to flip the script on me now, Field. Okay, I get it. I get what you're doing. You're going to leave the trades to me in mock 4.0. But hey, you're free. I'm gonna take it all. Hey, take all the rules and regulations away. We're going to allow trades. We're going to allow trades for young fielding. If you feel comfortable making trades in your mock coming out next week, go right ahead and do it.
We'll see whether I do that or not. The last thing here, and we got to get to two more prospects during this block, Mel, is the staff and the people that were around the Senior Bowl raved about what Jaxson Dart was doing during the week. The practice habits, the leadership, how he was kind of being the guiding force for the rest of the roster, which, remember, this is a roster of 130 or so guys just made up midair, right? These guys have, in a lot of cases, never even seen each other before, much less played on a team together. So impressive week from Jaxson Dart. I'm not sure anybody, though, Mel, helped their stock this past week more so than Gray Zabel from North Dakota State. What a week it was for this small school product who got big-time game.
Go back to our earlier podcast, Field. I was talking about Gray Zabel, and I'm thinking, he's going to be a good 4th, 5th round pick for somebody, right? He's that under-the-radar guy. He's playing left tackle at North Dakota State for the Bison, but he's going to be a guard, center in the NFL. He's played a lot of guard, played right tackle, practiced at center down in Mobile. He did all, but to see him down there with the best, just saying, hey, I don't care. I could have been a great player in the Big Ten SEC. Don't matter who you put me up against. I'm going to neutralize you. Yeah, he had a hiccup in the game, so be it. Who cares? At the end of the day, he had a phenomenal week. He had a phenomenal career. Stayed at North Dakota State. The loyalty to be there with the Bison, that speaks volumes about his character. Gray Zabel to me, Field, I think when you do your mock, and I'll leave it at this, I'd put him in the late first round.
That's interesting, Mel, because I may have maybe possibly already mapped out most of my picks. And it's possible. I'm not guaranteeing anything, but it's possible Gray Zabel finds himself in those first 32 selections. Mel, he was terrific. He was everything you could have hoped for more. He is clear. I would say this. He is definitely a guard or a center at the next level. He was a college left tackle. He played some guard too there, but college right tackle, college guard, college left tackle during his final season. I think he's a guard all the way in the NFL, and a darn good one, because he was, and I understand it's just one drill, and there's not, quarterback and live action and all that. He was the best player during one-on-ones, and that's the showcase drill of those Senior Bowl practices. A player who wasn't too far behind him, though, Mel, was Ozzie Trapillo, who you've talked about previously on this podcast. You got a lot of love for a couple of BC guys, and I love Ozzie for a lot of reasons. He was a right tackle for much of his BC career. He's a Massachusetts kid, Mel, the son of the late Steve Trapillo, who played, obviously, in the NFL as well. And Ozzie, a great kid. This guy is just a great, great kid who's got some serious game, too. But let's start with the size. I mean, he is massive, right? He is all of 6'8". He's got incredible length. He was repping at left tackle for much of this past week, Mel. He looked totally fine to me, and obviously that is the premium offensive tackle position. With Ozzie, I don't know that he is an elite athlete, but he's a good athlete, at least. He is at least a good athlete. Like, the foot quickness is there, the body coordination, to your feet and your hands, the top half and the lower half move in sync. That's all really good, Mel. And the length itself is going to give him a natural advantage. We've got a couple of these offensive tackles who, just based off of size alone, are hard to get around. Anthony Belton from North Carolina State, Ariante Ursary from Minnesota, Ozzie Trapillo from Boston College. I thought Ozzie was the most consistent of those guys that we saw down there last week in the Senior Bowl. Again, I haven't mapped too far into my mind what rounds 2 through 3 and 4 look like, but I think Ozzie Trapillo might go somewhere in the late 2 based off what we saw this past week.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Field, a name we had talked about 3, 4, 5 weeks ago was Anthony Belton. He was a guy who might have even been an Orange Crusher. I don't know if he was or not, but I know we talked about Anthony Belton.
He was,
Anthony Belton is a kid, impressed me from what I saw down in Mobile watching it. I'm saying, boy, he's getting after it, okay? And he is highly motivated, and he was on a mission, and he had a heck of a year. So Anthony Belton from NC State, we talked about Trapillo from BC and the ACC as well. Anthony Belton helped his stock, and he's going to be a very intriguing guy and then that second-round mix, because this kid, like I said, was, I think, a little under the radar during the year, but after Senior Bowl week, that's not the case anymore.
Mel, there's so many good takeaways from the Senior Bowl week, and just a huge thank you to Jim Nagy and his entire staff. Jim does a brilliant job bringing as many of the best prospects, and I'm telling you what, I felt like I was watching a lot of the first 3 to 4 rounds of the NFL draft when I was down there in Mobile last week. Kudos to you, Jim. Kudos to the entire staff there for making it happen, and thank you to the great city of Mobile for always being so hospitable. When we come back, though, we're planting our flags on guys. We're diving into some of our guys and some of our most underrated prospects. We call them the Orange Crushers. That's next here on First Draft. All right, Mel Kiper Jr. and Field Yates back here with you. And Mel, in just a bit, we're going to do our underrated prospects, Orange Crushers. But we got to start. You know, it's the point of the draft, Mel, where once the season's over, everybody else joins us in the draft fray, and people try to claim guys. This is my guy. Well, we got a guy here, Mel. This is our new segment called We Got a Guy. And you love the wallpaper here. So good, so good. I don't know how many people are watching this right now versus listening, but for those that are watching right now, so good. We absolutely love it. Let's dive into a player, Mel. Then you got a guy. Like, this is your guy. This is amongst your guys. A player that you would be in the draft room, pounding the table for. You start.
I love the Mid-American Conference, those Toledo Rockets, right? Again, remember Quinn Mitchell, right? There's other guys on that team this year. I mentioned Maxon Hook, the safety, but Darius Alexander. You know that scheme, versatile, super athletic at 6'4", 315 pounds, can play 3-4 defensive end, defensive tackle, 3 technique. He can put him on his feet. I mean, this guy can do so many things. Defensive line coach, you're going to love this kid. He played in 57 games in his college career. Okay, and you go to several games this year where he was just jumped out at you with the ability to get after the quarterback, to wreak havoc, stop the run on the way to the quarterback is Darius Alexander. I'll go get you, but I'll now go get the quarterback. So I'll tell you what, with scheme, with the ability to play in so many different defenses, so many different ways to utilize his skill set, Darius Alexander, we talk about defensive tackles and defensive ends. Where are you going to put him in what group and what category? He's just all over the place in terms of being the multiple scheme versatile guy he is. This kid had a heck of a week, and he had a heck of a career with the Toledo Rockets. I'm big on Darius Alexander. I had him in my top 10s. I've discussed him a lot over the course of the season, and to see him down there doing what he did definitely helped his stock immensely.
Yeah, I was going to say, he might have entered the week, Mel, as maybe like a mid-round pick. That's been solidified, right? Like, there's no doubt he is going somewhere in the first, I think, 4 rounds at worst for Darius Alexander, but moving his way on up, perhaps even higher up the board there. He was great. Got these long arms, too. They're like 34-inch arms. The guy is an absolute beast. That much is for sure. Here's my guy of the week, Mel. And you've talked about him, too. I believe he did crack your first-round mock draft, but I think he's being a little bit underappreciated. It's Maxwell Hairston from the University of Kentucky. And Mel, I will say this. For cornerbacks, I want cornerbacks that affect the football. I want guys that find their way to get the hands on the ball, whether it's PBUs or whether it is interceptions. Well, a couple of years ago, he led the SEC in interceptions. He had 2 pick sixes in the same game against Vanderbilt. This past year for Kentucky, he had a pick 6 against Ohio. I saw him this week down in Mobile for a couple of days. He ended up not being able to practice the last day, I believe it was, with what sounds like a very minor injury, but you got to be protective of yourself. Max Hairston finds the football. It's the nose for the ball is legit. He has so much twitch. His ability to get out of his back pedal and fire back towards the football. He's so instinctive, too, with understanding route concepts. He has great ball skills. That much is for sure. And Mel, I think once we get to Indianapolis, if he runs at the 40, this guy's going to flat out fly. He is going to run so fast. I think there is a little bit of an opening here for a cornerback to maybe grab that 3rd or 4th corner spot, depending on where you are at with guys. Obviously, Travis Hunter and Will Johnson are going to be further up the board, but there's a spot up for grabs there. I think somewhere in the late first round, maybe even the 20s for a guy like Max Hairston. Absolutely flies. Great kid, ton of production, missed some time this year because of a shoulder injury. It was great to see him back at the end of the season and then back looking like his normal self at the Senior Bowl. This kid's a flat-out playmaker, Mel. I like playmakers at corner.
It's a good call because guess what? When I had him in the late first, people were saying, oh, really? I'm not excited. Yeah, I'd be excited about this pick in the late first round because he's like the shortstop field that wants the ball hit to him, right? Yeah. If you're playing shortstop, you want the ball. You don't want to say, hey, don't hit it to me. Don't hit it to me. Hit it somewhere else. You want a corner who says, throw it at me. And he has that inner confidence and has that smile, and he's got that ability to say, hey, I'm going to go out there, and even if I get beat, I'm going to come back and keep competing. And he wants the ball. He wants those challenges that's going to come a cornerback's way. He doesn't shy away from it. He wants it. He craves it, and he knows he can handle that challenge. So for me, the attitude, the approach of Max Harrison, how well coached these players are for Kentucky overall on both sides of the ball impresses me. Okay, talk about what Drew Phillips was able to do as a rookie. Max Hairston is a guy certainly more than deserving of being in that, I'd say anywhere from 20 to 32 is where I think Max Hairston comes off the board. You're right. With some questions, some guys with some injuries, right? Revel Jr. from East Carolina coming off the injury, Benjamin Morrison coming off the injury. We talk about Will Johnson, what's his 40 time going to be with Travis Hunter, a cornerback receiver or both. This is a kid kind of sneaking up the board a little bit to where he's going to be in the first round.
Yeah, the only question probably with Max would be, what does he weigh in at the combine? He's not as big as, Nate Wiggins was 6'0", almost 6'2" was Nate Wiggins. He was only 100 and whatever it was, 68 or 171 pounds, slighter guy. Max is a smaller guy, but if he bulks up to 185, Mel, I don't see a reason why a 5'11", 180-pound corner can't go in the first round. All right, we're going to end the show here as we always do with our Orange Crushers. It's a Mel-driven segment. Your idea, Mel, it is a player who deserves some more attention on the national radar. You begin, and you're not going too far from where you are sitting right now.
I put a fence around this Maryland area from high school to college, and this kid's a heck of a Dante Trader Jr. at Maryland, lacrosse player, high school and at Maryland as well. I got second in tackles this year, third in tackles the year prior, and second in tackles even back to 2022. Interceptions every year, okay? 2 in 2022, 2 in 2023, 1 last year, breaking up passes, and he's always around the ball, and he doesn't miss open field tackles field. Dante Trader Jr., pound for pound, was one of the best players in the Big Ten. And I think for Maryland, for the Terrapins, he was a guy that, he screamed, hey, look at me. Just why am I not getting more attention? And he's going to get it. There's no question he's going to get it in these months leading up to the draft based on people going back and watching him a lot closer. Okay, from what they saw down there, and the fact that he's a multi-sport athlete, another kid who just loves the game. He's a competitor. And Dante Trader Jr. will have a nice career in the NFL. He's my Orange Crusher because I just love his style of play because he shows up passionately to play this game and aggressively to play this game each and every week.
Mel, there's probably a joke to be made somewhere here. You mentioned the lacrosse background. He was the number 5 recruit on the Inside Lacrosse top recruits the year he was coming out of high school. Bill Belichick might have taken this guy like the 3rd round. You got a Maryland kid who played lacrosse as well, a defensive player. I mean, it would have been a perfect storm for Belichick to find a way to make that guy a player on his roster. Last one here from me, Mel. We talked about Gray Zabel, small school offensive lineman, making his mark last week. Carson Vincent from Alabama A&M. I thought held up really well. I mean, no surprise, Mel. The college tape was ridiculous, right? This guy is playing against a bunch of players that probably won't be playing football beyond their college football careers. But what stood out to me, Mel, was the grit and the competitiveness in the one-on-one. He's a big fella. He's got some strength. He held up, too. And, these small school guys, Mel, one thing that I was keeping an eye on during the week for the small school guys that don't see top-flight competition every single week is not just, hey, can they get the job done? But on the reps in which they don't get the job done, does it break them? Does it make them feel like, you know what, I really wasn't meant to be playing at this level? Not the case at all here for Carson Vincent. Yeah, every player had their wins and their losses this past week, but the mental toughness that he showed to keep coming back and acting like he belonged, to me, very much caught my attention this past week. I'll be the first to admit I had not done extensive homework on Carson Vincent going into the Senior Bowl week beyond an initial scout. He has me thinking more and more about going back to dig deeper on what this kid brought to the table. So if you're looking for an offensive tackle, somewhere probably on day 3, Carson Vincent, a name that your team should know. That's going to do it here for us today on First Draft. As always, we love talking about the NFL draft, and we are getting so much closer. Before you know it, there'll be mock drafts aplenty and many more names from my guys to Orange Crushers of the week. But until Thursday, he's Mel Kiper Jr. I am Field Yates. Go check us out on the NFL on ESPN YouTube channel. Until then, everybody, we'll talk to you soon.